On today's episode of the DeRaud-Messinger Show, Dylan, we're talking about the Senior Bowl and also just where players on the Longhorns are standing in terms of NFL draft status. Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's greatly appreciated. Now, Dylan, we're going to start with the Senior Bowl. There's 2 Texas participants. I was trying to get the weight and size for T'Vondre Sweat, Dylan, but they did not list it because, boy, was I excited to see the numbers on that. But Christian Jones listed at 6'5", 318 pounds. T'Vondre Sweat also was looking good during practice. Both guys, Sweat in particular, I saw some where he's knocking over offensive linemen. How do you feel
Yeah,
about
there
the?
was a headline that said he's folding offensive linemen like chairs. So
I
I think
saw
he's doing
some of
well.
that. Yet again, I've talked about it watching T'Vondre Sweat at a stadium, let's say, such as McLean this season, Dylan, when the Longhorns played the Bears. I was really high up and needed binoculars pretty much to see the field. But there's one guy I didn't need binoculars to see, and that was T'Vondre Sweat, as he
Ugh.
was getting double teamed and pushing people back regardless. T'Vondre, definitely a big NFL draft prospect. Yet again, we're going to talk about some of the NFL draft status in this video of guys in terms of where they're positioned in certain mock drafts. And Mel Kiper in his draft position rankings has T'Vondre as his second defensive tackle, which of course puts you in pretty good territory there. That means you're probably doing either fringe first round, most likely second round pick, just with how this draft class is shaking up. But any opinions on Senior Bowls and just mocks in general?
Yeah, I think what they were both hoping for in terms of Christian Jones and Devontae Sweat, I think they proved stuff out on the field. I know going into the Senior Bowl and based off kind of the end of last season, Christian Jones was a fringe seventh rounder. You could see him kind of going undrafted, picking up there. I think the way that he's performed in the Super Bowl and during the Senior Bowl and during the practices, he could very well kind of really position himself to be drafted or maybe even move into earlier in the day 3 kind of selection rounds. So he's obviously proven stuff, especially with those measurables. He's got the size that you want. He's just one of the older players with some injury, with past injuries. Then with Sweat, I think what you're really looking at is that second and first round, and it's really just going to depend on the teams that are sitting there in the later rounds. I think one option that you could really look at, I know this is, I'm not saying this out of bias, but literally a team that might need this is the Lions, some interior help, but also they are looking at secondary. You can see Sweat kind of going there. One of the teams in the Super Bowl could pick him up, especially like the 49ers have struggled in the run game recently, defending the run game. Sweat could easily, I could see him going to the 49ers. So I think that's been the biggest takeaway. And I think Sweat still he hasn't there's still more for him to prove, especially with those measurables, but he's sitting there on the cusp of that first round.
And the fun thing in terms of defensive tackles, Dylan, it seems like every team needs one. Of course, some are
Yes.
some
Yes.
some are in better spots than others, but it seems like at least every other team could do with a guy like T'Vondre Sweat. So a
Yeah.
late first round pick would not surprise me. Of course, though, the fun part about the NFL draft and just speculation, Dylan, is that it really never turns out how you expect it to be, unless you're maybe pick number 1. So, of course, if you're a Texas fan, you're hoping he gets drafted early. Might be round 2. We'll see. But Dylan, in Kuiper's rankings, you got a lot of different Longhorns that are top or near the top of their list at their respective positions. I'm just going to list them off real quick and we can talk about a few if you'd like. So Xavier Worthy to start. Kuiper has him at wide receiver number 7. Adonai Mitchell at number 8. T'Vondre Sweat, as I mentioned, the second ranked defensive tackle on Kuiper's rankings. Byron Murphy, yet again, we love him. DT number 3 on Kuiper. And I just
I
wanted
could
to.
see him getting to number one, especially after the combine. Just the way that he's a freak
Oh,
athlete, could
yeah.
totally see him taking that one spot.
And I was wanting to pause on Murphy here because, as you said, his combine numbers you assume are going to be off the charts. That man is 100% muscle at a defensive tackle position where, of course, guys are country strong, Dylan, but not always
Yeah.
just lean. This guy's as lean as you can get for that size. And I saw a CBS mock draft. I'm sure some people have already seen and have talked about it. But one CBS mock draft had Murphy at, wait for it, Dylan, I don't know if you know this, pick number 5 to the Los Angeles
Wow.
Chargers.
Wow.
It just shows that he's trending upwards. Will he go that early? I wouldn't put money on it, Dylan, but at this point, first round pick for Byron Murphy would not surprise me,
Yeah.
especially as we said, there's a couple of destinations that need help on that defensive line. And even if he slides down, we might see a back-to-back Longhorn selection with Murphy and Sweat. But how do you feel about Murphy and all that draft speculation?
Yeah, and based off just kind of history at the positions, teams that are going to take a defensive lineman in the first round, they want a guy that's going to be there for all three downs, right? While Sweat, I think, could be a Pro Bowler at some point, right? Just with the talent that he has. But I don't know if he's an every down interior lineman. He'd be mostly down there the first and second down, depending, and then third down, depending on the formation, right? But with Murphy, a lot of I think as things go on, you're going to hear a lot of Aaron Donald just with stature, size, strength, right? That's when you start to see, okay, totally see him mid first round, maybe even earlier, just because there's a lot of teams still kicking themselves for not picking Donald earlier in past drafts, right? So I could totally see Murphy. I know that's probably a bold take putting him at 5, right? I don't think he'll go 5, but it's definitely showing like, hey, this is a guy that has the talent. If teams fall in love with him enough, he could easily go top 10 given just where it's headed.
That's how I feel too, Dylan, especially with a position like quarterback being so valued in this draft. You might see a couple quarterbacks in those first maybe top 7 picks. So top 5 pick for Murphy, I'm not sure about, but at this point, his prospect of becoming a first rounder is looking a lot better. And as you said, he's getting a lot of those Aaron Donald comparisons, which always help you in that little late push towards the NFL draft.
Yep.
And I would say if I was a defensive lineman, Dylan, I'm not a scientist here, I'm not an expert, but if I'm a defensive lineman and I'm being compared to Aaron Donald, I'm liking life at that point in time.
And those matter a lot because with Anthony Richardson, you were like, well, this guy's just got this raw talent. Like, are you sure he's going to go number 1 or, really high? And it's like, actually, hearing a lot of comparisons to Cam Newton. And then you're just like, okay, he is now going top 10 for sure.
Yeah, it is funny those little comparisons. They help our memory and help us associate things. It does help. I won't let anyone tell me otherwise. But it was nice to see, Dylan. We're talking about it, and you specifically, that progression that we've seen with Texas players, Murphy being one of them. I mean, coming out of high school, originally committed to Baylor, Dylan. I saw him in a playoff game for DeSoto, and he's one of those guys where you look at him on the field and you're like, how is this guy, no disrespect intended, Dylan, but how's this guy committed to Baylor with like not really a big offer? Is kind of surprising at that point in time. And he was putting up Aaron Donald numbers in high school. So you had him get to Texas. Of course, it took a little bit of time for him to get to his role, but I wouldn't say it was a slow amount of time. I would say he's accelerated pace. He made his name early and often, and now is at a point where I think he had a year left, Dylan, and he's going to the NFL draft and likely the first NFL player to be selected from the Longhorns in this draft class. But also, Christian Jones, as you said, last year, he was maybe fringe 7th round pick, maybe undrafted free agent. And here you go now, yet again, maybe round 5. It doesn't sound impressive or crazy, but that's a big jump for somebody, and it's a showcase to this coaching staff. But any comments on that?
Yeah, again, Texas has got a lot of prototypes that you want. Christian Jones, Devontae Sweat, those guys are, I would say, are gonna get drafted. And like you're saying, like Sweat, there was his first 3-4 years. It was like, okay, big dude, but you're not seeing the production that you saw his final, 5th year, and he really took off at that point, right? And that is like we were talking about, just kudos to the coaching staff, defensive line, Bo Davis, right? Like all that type of stuff and what they've been able to do player development wise.
Exactly. And speaking of development, Dylan Kuiper, the number 1 running back, Jonathan Brooks.
Oh
That
yeah,
just shows the development in that running back room. Not only the development, but the eyes in recruiting. Jonathan Brooks not the highest rated running back, but yet again, if you see him play, Dylan, yet again, Hallettsville was a fun watch. I covered a game. It's not surprising when you watch a game like that to see that he's going to transform into something that he became. So that's yet again kudos to just the Longhorns in terms of developing talent. They got a guy that had potential, but making that seen in the college game. So Kuiper has him as his first rated running back on his draft board. We'll see. It would be funny, Dylan, if, we're hoping for, of course, a quick recovery for Jonathan Brooks, but it would be kind of funny if he's the first running back picked and would just be I guess, a marker of how talented he is despite a major injury. How do you feel
Yeah.
about Brooks's play, and is he going to the Lions?
Yeah, well, okay. Listen, I think the Lions are in a good spot there. Wouldn't say no to. With that, I was gonna say it's gonna be a weird one, right? Because I know with the injury, people are gonna be talking themselves out of it a little bit. How healthy can he be after
and
that?
and it's a running back.
And it's a running back, right? And it feels like unless you're that hyper talented, a lot of productive production in college, you're not necessarily going in the first round. So Brooks feels like a second rounder, but that's where he gets a little tough because then it's positions of need. Um, obviously he's a running back. Is
Yeah.
there a running back that's going to pop off in the combine and really wow people with their speed? So Brooks is somebody that I could see him falling. I still think he's going to be a great pro, but going first round might be tough just because you have to be sitting out a lot of that combine stuff that you definitely want to be there for when you're running back.
Yeah, I feel the same there. I think round 2 or round 3, most likely. And he might end up in a situation doing that benefits him the most where he can sit it out a little bit and learn while he's recovering. And then as soon as he's ready to go, he's kind of a plug and
Yeah.
play sort of guy. So that will
You know a
be.
team that would love him, Devin?
Oh, I wonder who.
Cowboys.
Oh, the
The
Cowboys.
Cowboys wouldn't
Cowboys
mind
would
having
love, I
that, especially
think.
with the running back help.
They would love him or any of these guys I think we talked about. They got a lot of needs out there in Dallas. But other than Brooks, another Dallas area native, Dylan, in terms of Cowboys to Dallas natives transition, Jatavian Sanders, tight end number
Yeah.
2 on Kuiper's list, behind, of course, Brock Bowers. Would not surprise me. I don't know what round, Dylan, we'd want to think about Jatavian. That's maybe a round 3, round 4 pick. Depending,
Really? You think that low?
maybe round 3. I think round 4 would be shocking. He might make a round 2
I
entrance.
was thinking round two. Like that's where I feel like just with his talent level. Again, I know I keep bringing up the combine, but that definitely does raise levels. And tight end position is becoming so important. You saw
Well, he
the
runs like
amount
a
of tight
deer
ends.
too, so the combine you would think will help.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. So
we'll
and he's got a ton of skill sets that'll transfer.
yeah, and we'll definitely probably have to make a post combine edition of this to give more updates. I
Yeah.
think Dylan he could make it to 2. I'm just for my own sake of
I
expectations.
was not expect what why are you expecting round three? Like what are you hearing?
I just think in terms of round 3, tight end of course is not the biggest of needs for most teams, but just in the draft, typically first 2 rounds, Dylan, you're going to see the offensive line, defensive line. You're going to get all the talent there. Then you look, as we were talking about, you get the running backs, tight ends. That's usually, as you were talking about, round 2, round 3 is when you start looking at some of those other positions. Jatavian,
Mm,
Dylan, there's some inconsistencies there in his game. He's a great player, and Dylan, maybe, in my eyes, in terms of just sole talent, the best tight end Texas has ever had. I know there might be some debate there to be had, but I think a team would be happy to get him in round 3. But you might be right. He might be a second round guy, and after the combine, that might even be more likely the case. Who knows? But Brock Bowers, of course, the obvious choice at running, or excuse me, tight end number 1. I think
yeah.
Jatavian, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me round 2 pick, but for now, I'm just going to say round 3 and then wait for combine results.
Yeah.
And then finally, Jalen Ford. We're talking about progression here, Dylan. I believe he was the lowest rated recruit in his recruiting class in that Texas group coming out of high
Right.
school. Now he's the 5th ranked linebacker. Talk about Jalen Ford, Dylan.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about with round three, round four, I could see that, right? Off ball linebacker, it's that's tough, right? Linebacker is tend to be falling off a little bit. Unless you're out otherworldly talented player, it's tough to crack into that first round. So he's somebody I could see rise, but I also think he's a guy that I could totally see going to a contender in the round 3, round 4 area, just given his leadership style and the way he'll be able to kind of plug gaps, but not have to be the do it all linebacker for a team.
Yeah, I think out of all the guys we mentioned, Dylan, Jalen Ford's probably the lower on the list just of where he's going to get picked. As you said, he brings that leadership ability, and I think would be great to have the headset in his helmet, Dylan, at the NFL level. He definitely will get everybody engaged and all their assignments communicated to them. I think round 3, round 4, as you said, is probably where he'll end up going. I do think he'll be below Jatavian. Yet again, Dylan, I still have second round hopes for Jatavian. Don't have it like I'm writing him off, but
I was not gonna. I was coming into the conversation being like, okay, round 2, and then you said round 3, round 4. I was like, oh wow, okay, either I'm way off or
no.
there's just a
I think that's
disconnect.
the range though. I think 2 to 4.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
understood.
not necessarily saying he's getting picked in the fourth round. I just think that's where we'll likely see if he goes past
There's some
that.
recency bias for me.
If he goes
Well,
past,
just like because you had Kincaid go first round, you had Laporta, and then Michael Mayer going
yeah.
early second round. I think
Well,
that's where it mostly
and I
coming from.
think Jatavian fits the modern mold of tight end, where he's a guy that you're going to want on the field regardless out wide, and yet again runs like a deer. So, as you're saying, that bodes well in this conversation of he could go higher, and yet again, with
Yeah,
nice combine results, Dylan. I don't want to talk myself into it because yet again we love the guy, and sure recency bias, whatever. He could be a fringe first round pick if he tests quite well. Maybe late
yeah.
if a team needs a tight end. So we'll have to make an update to this, but right now, probably second or third for him. Jalen Ford, third or fourth would probably be my expectation for now, but definitely, Dylan, this will be the most fruitful draft class for Longhorns, and Lord knows how long.
It's about time.
It's about dang time. All
I
right.
think time.
How do y'all feel about the Longhorns draft class, the upcoming? How do you feel about these picks? Who's going to be the first Longhorn taken? Let us know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, have a great rest of your day.